when black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, then the black man will think like a black man, and he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together.
Truth seekers, please understand, mental dialogue.
What's up, everybody? It's your Mental Activist Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to the Mental Dialogue Perspective. Okay, I got something double. You hear that double?
I heard it for a second, but it passed.
Okay. All right, y'all. I got some technical difficulties here. Give me a second. Let me figure out what's going on. I got a delay here, and I'm not certain what's causing it. Let me try to figure out. All right, I got a delay on my side. All right. New dilemma, y'all. It happens with technology. Give me a second. I must have something. Oh, I think, you know what? I may have the broadcast on somewhere else. Yeah. I think I got it. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. Y'all had to play it on another tab and didn't realize it. All right, y'all. Sorry about the rough start. For the Mental Dialogue Perspective, where we react to various clips around the internet in reference to race, sex, and culture. I highlighted today we'll be discussing immigration. My brother Emil Bryant, who rocks with me on our Politically Conscious show, for those who are familiar with him there. You were quite making your name for yourself. I don't know if you saw some of the comments last week, but people were saying, hey, man, Emil's always on point. It's literally on the page, on the YouTube page, by the way. So as you see below, subscribe to the YouTube page. I'm always terrible at reminding people subscribe, follow us, and all that type of stuff. But you've been getting some comments just on what you've been doing on the Politically Conscious show. And from time to time, you've helped me out on the Mental Dialogue YouTube show that we did for 8 years via Blog Talk. And so now we're on our new video format. So thank you for jumping on at the last minute. I was preparing to do a show by myself, and now I got my brother, so I know we're going to take it up another notch because you joined in for however long you're able to join. All right, as y'all see, I'm just putting this thing together. Emil, if you will, just give them a little bit of your background. Today is not in reference to politics, if you will, but, you know, I do have a clip that highlights some politics in reference to this immigration issue because it has always been much of a political one, and we just had some conversation on Politically Conscious about it. But just share some of your background as I turn this air down, because I know people can hear that. I'm going to turn this air off, and we're going to keep this show going. So you can hold it till you see me come back in the face. So how much background you want to give, tell them about the academy, all that stuff, and you see my face come back in this video.
No problem. My name is Emil Bryant. I rock with Montoya because we're both Air Force Academy graduates and brothers from another mother. One of the things that I try to do as a consultant is I have asked people to tell the truth. My clients, they flourish when they confront their truth, whether it's in business or in personal life, and definitely in politics. And people don't like to hear that because they believe you want to give people what they want to hear. Here's what people want that they don't say all the time. They want to be told enough information to make a good decision about their own future. And when you hold it back or you spin it, you're really taking the people's ability to decide. You're robbing them of their own agency. And so we want our leadership, whether it's in business, in personal life, or in politics, we want our leadership to give us agency. Yes, I want your vote. Yes, I want your dollar. Yes, I want your business, but I also want your loyalty. And the only way I know how to generate and maintain loyalty is to tell people the truth consistently so they can rely on you as a source of good information.
Nah, thank you. And I love you always bringing that perspective to anything we do. That's what we pride ourselves in, is context and perspective. We try to give you the correct context because typically when people are spinning you, they're changing the context, narrowing the context, all type of things. And then perspective wise at Mental Dialogue, if you are getting are familiar with our page, we don't necessarily tell you how to think. Our motto is all I ask is that you think. And so we like to give you additional things to think about regardless of the narrative that's being presented. And today we're going to highlight and focus on immigration and have some other things as well. But as long as I have a meal, I'm just glad to have you with me. So they're not just getting only my perspective. And again, me giving a perspective, just to be clear, it's not for me to telling you how to think, but I will challenge how you think on this issue. And when it comes to immigration, I think there are many sides to it, and specifically in the African American community, which made me decide to discuss this again, is because there's this ongoing dialogue about whether what we're seeing right now, specifically with the ICE protests and the ICE raids, how does it apply? How does immigration overall, in the context that is kind of narrowed in when it comes to politics of the African American community? Where should we stand? So I'm not going to tell you where to stand today, but we're going to talk about it from whether you stand with the, in a sense, those who are protesting, or if you stand against, or if you're neutral. We're going to have a dialogue through all of those contexts, just to have you think about things. And you can, if you see the link, you can actually join the show. That's something I'm trying to bring into this particular show. We don't do it on Politically Conscious, but I do want to give you as a viewer an opportunity to jump on with us if you're willing to. You can mute your face or hide your face if you don't want to put your face on. So I'm just kind of hoping to open it up. But Emil, thank you. So let's do what we do. Let's get started with the clip, and I will get your response and we'll go from there. All right.
Sir.
All right. So good stuff. All right, y'all. Make sure y'all are sharing this show. If you like what we're doing, make sure you're sharing. Again, I'm trying to get better at reminding people, let people know what we're doing over here with the Mental Dialogue perspective. All right, let me find this very first cut. Give me a second here. I'm producing and doing the show, so here we go.
La comunidad que nos va a sacar de este hueco se llaman los negros
100%.
americanos.
100%.
African American community is the only community that has the power in this country to change anything. They are the only one with the experience of civil matter. They are the only one que tenían el esclavo ahí mismitico. They are the only one that are not going to get deported anywhere, and you cannot put them all in jail. So African American community, which is the community that is stepped on by Cubans, the most are the only ones that are going to save the Latinos. And I clap for the African American community that has not come out, because it is not. I do. We didn't do shit for them.
I get it. I get it. But I don't.
Me and you support, but in masses, we didn't support anything that was going with them. Latinos look at Cubans specifically. I'm not going to talk about any other community because I'm not part of that community, even though I'm a Latina with them. Cubans talk shit about African Americans.
It's true.
Cubans did not support African Americans. Cubans think that they all victimize themselves, that of this, all of that. African Americans are the only ones that are going to save your asses, Latinos. So you better start kissing. If you're going to kiss some ass in this country, you better kiss some black.
Hey, I think she got a point. And I love point making up.
She was throwing elbows. I'm not going to lie. She was throwing I was like, okay, she's serious.
So if you're not familiar with the Mental Dialogue perspective, if you will, we could pride ourselves in doing hard conversations on race, sex, and culture. And I thought that's just a great way to kick this off. I didn't want to beat around the bush or jump around the bush when it comes to how the African American community is watching in many cases, because I don't think, I haven't watched the news to see the protests. So I don't know. You probably could tell me better than I would know, because I'm not watching the news, and I don't really for the most part. If the protests are multicultural, but I would expect that it would be mostly the Latino community that was out there. Again, I haven't watched them, and I'm just highlighting because just that video right there just goes head on the nail as far as what the issue is within our community. So what are you seeing from a media perspective? Is it multicultural? I assume that it's not. I could be wrong. And then I want to talk specifically about what she said, but I just wanted to, give me some perspective.
It is multicultural. It is definitely Latin community as well as whites who are doing the bulk of it. And there are some black folk that are also out there, and they have their motivations. Here's the problem, right? Our equities are always intermingled with the least of any group's equities, right? So what we have to always remember is whether we start it or we end it or we're in it or not, it affects us as Black people in America. It's just the standard that we have to live under, that the reason why she said what she said is because when other groups get what they think is equality or their fair share, they sort of turn their backs on Black people. And we are like, wait a second, you followed us. Our civil rights movement was for everybody. What we did, raised the floor for the entire group of America, poor whites, Latino, Asian, Black, everybody who rose because those laws which applied to us, which were supposed to apply for us, we know that they apply for everybody. We're not mad about that. That's not something that Black people are upset about. We love being the leaders in that way. And this is her point. Every time Black people do something, it benefits everybody. So when we need help, we should expect that everybody who's been benefiting from the labor we've put in, we should be able to say, okay, look, now it's now our community specifically needs support. And then they're like, wait, what? Who? And yes, you will have many people who say, no, you can find Latinos here, Latinos there. You can find Asians here, Asians there. And that's true. But also listen to what she said. In her community, they talk trash about Black people in America. So there's two ways you can see it. And she saw it the other way. And that is that there's enough of her community that she has a strong opinion about what she's hearing and what she's seeing when it comes to supporting Black people in America. So she's like, if you can't support them, why should you expect them to support you? Now, we have our own selfish reasons for wanting to support any people who are oppressed by our government in America, because we know at some point those handcuffs, those guns, and that attention turns toward us. We know it from history. We don't have to doubt it. So we have a selfish interest in looking out for others. But do others have a selfish interest in looking out for us? And that commentary she was putting out was obviously not enough people in her community think they have equity in and a stake in how things transpire for us. And so she says, good job, Black people in America. Since we have not shown you massive support when you needed it, stay at home.
Hey, I respect the perspective. Let's go into some history. And you're always able to help me with this. And you mentioned it on the show in reference to, here's where I would like to lay out the history for, in my opinion, why there is, to a degree, a dilemma in our community. Because as you said, there is that natural concern for those who understand politics or think about the historical context of what we're seeing over there, or as the brother that Brent House came on our show just a couple of days ago, right, and said the water edge will come in a sense to our door one day or whatever. And so for people who see, in a sense, America's oppression, for lack of a better word, I don't know if it's a word I actually want to use, but who sees America's oppression on one group, for those who, as you said, because of historical context, seeing as, hey, that water may come to the edge of our door one day, that's the group of African Americans who are in support of what they're seeing happening right now in the Latino community, right? And like she says, good job for those who stay at home based on the fact that you don't support us in mass. So let's get into the history of some of that. So here's a couple things I thought about preparing for the show, Emil. Again, I just want to get your thoughts on this perspective. But in reality, when you say a lot of things are intermingled, I'm saying there's a perspective in which, for some people, saying not only should we sit at home because there wasn't mass support for our movement at various times, whether current times, the George Floyd stuff, or even historical, but there's also an aspect that maybe it's not as intertwined as we think. And I'm talking about from this historical context. So if we go all the way back to the imperialism of even taking over the Americas, if you will, here's the context. The Americans, in a sense, was mostly fought between the French and the English. I'm talking about the North America, if you will. The Spanish were here for it, to a degree in parts, right? But generally speaking, the America we think of in the American independence, in a sense, was white America taking from the Native Americans, enslaving us, and then making this land, quote unquote, their land. Like, I'm just kind of putting it in context. Right. And then when we think of South America, in a sense, Spanish, in a sense, kind of had the power in South America, and that's why we have a Latin community, right? A lot of more intermixing with the actual natives in the South than you had in the North. But when you put it in simple context, like I'm saying, what you have when it comes to this is you have white America, North America, right? Coming Europeans, if you will, taking over North America, taking it from the Native Americans, bringing us here in chains, if you will, and eventually America becoming what it became. Well, when we say intermix the Latino community and the Black community, well, the South is really just the Spanish whites, Spain, taking over those natives. And so in our reality, how does that intermix? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's a good
that we should intermix when it's really just the Spanish whites per se in the South America coming up here and saying, "Oh, we're being oppressed by the same people," but those people did the exact same thing to the Africans that they brought to the South America, where most Africans went. Most Africans were sent to the South America versus North America. So where is there even in a mix, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I love that we can unpack some of this stuff and do it in a more sort of a long form conversation, because this stuff is complex. So what you're saying is really powerful. Let's go real quick to just the United States, right? California, New Mexico, Arizona, all the border states of what we call Mexico today, right? Tejas, right? Those border states, those used to be owned by Mexico. It was once called New Spain, right? And so New Spain turned into Mexico. And so America fought and won wars that brought California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas into the Union as we know it today. So the border, the Rio Grande, and all that sort of stuff that is the border today comes from that war. Those wars, right? There were more than one, but we'll talk about the Spanish-American War and some other wars prior to that as well, Mexican-American War. Mexico, Cinco de Mayo, Mexico was a haven for escaped slaves. We should never forget that the path to freedom was north and south.
Right.
And because of that, there's a large Afro-Mexican population, formerly enslaved Black people who lived in America, as well as people who were enslaved in other parts of South America that were imported directly from Africa. So there's that part of the conversation. Now you have Mexicans who are a rainbow, or Latinos who are a rainbow of shades. And we know that colorism is real in all of our communities, American, Mexican, Brazilian. Colorism is a real thing. And although race is a social construct, it has real effects on people's lives. We say all that because in certain parts of the Latin community, being lighter skinned confers some privilege over having darker skin. So some people are considered more Latin because they have lighter skin and others darker skin. So when you're talking about Spanish descendants, you are talking about people who have that lighter skin saying things about people who have darker skin, whether it's Dominicans talking about Haitians, or you're talking about Afro-Mexicans, or you're talking about Afro-Colombians. All of these people have this similar colorism paradigm.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing that play out in America right now, because there's a certain group of people who believe that the government doing what it's doing to Latin immigrants, illegal and legal, is okay. They voted for it, they expect it, they applaud it. That group of people is also now wondering if they made a good decision, though they are applauding it, because they're seeing some of the people they love and people that they work with and people that they spend time with being affected by it. So now it's like, wait a second, we thought you were only going after them. And the them was people who didn't come here the way they came here. For instance, those ladies on our clip were Cuban. Many Cubans came here under an amnesty policy, or we were trying to destabilize the Cuban government. Right. So the government, the United States government, said, if you make it to our shores, you're good. Doesn't matter how you get here. If you get here, you're good. They never extended that to Haiti, Dominican Republic, or to Mexico. So now you have one group of Latin community who made it here because the government was encouraging, destabilizing a government. So boom. And Fidel Castro wisely, if you watch the movie Scarface, which is an illustration of this principle, said, I will send you some of my worst people as well. Y'all all go, right? So there were people who wanted to leave and people who were forced to leave. Right. Those people are also in this large group of people with this broad spectrum of political views that we call Latin or Latino or Latina. This problem that we're seeing now with ICE and all this sort of stuff, it's pervasive in the sense that we, black people in America, like, perhaps I don't know if I should be in all this. Well, right now you got Latino people saying the same thing. Some group is like, well, maybe they're getting rid of the bad ones because the bad ones don't look like. So you're talking about
and let me say this. I thank you so much for that breakdown. And I want to highlight, because you said this on the show too, when you said, because the ones that are like, hey, they don't look like, goes back to talking about how Mexicans themselves who were trying to come in legally wanted to also be designated as white. I want to, like, that historical context has to be part of this conversation. So if you could just even give the details, we didn't let you go into detail on the last show, but now we're talking race, sex, and culture. So any details to, again, we're highlighting this history to explain. I don't know that this is a real dilemma, but we're watching it play out within our own community for those calling other blacks stupid for caring about it and that type of thing. And so we're just trying to give their entire history to explain why I think it's okay for people to land wherever they want to land on it. And we're just trying to give them more information for why people are landing where they're landing. So yes, there was a very concerted effort for Mexicans at one point coming into this country who wanted to be deemed as white because they understood the privilege that America, with this racial construct built on the back of race, how it benefited them to be designated as white. And then after our civil rights movement, then you started saying, well, no, give me that designation because I see that it helps me. So we watch, if you will, specifically that community, in my opinion, be able to jump on both sides of it because of their own political interests. It doesn't surprise me. That's what you do. Your personal interest can decide where you land on a policy. And I'm saying that currently, the way this is playing out, the personal interest for some African Americans is like, what do we even have to do with this? I think it's a fair thought to a degree. I don't think I'm completely right, but I'm just talking through it all.
I love that you're talking through it, because part of the challenge is, like, you go back to LULAC, which was formed in 1929, and the leader of LULAC was very explicit, like, we Mexicans are designated as white people in America, and that persisted through the 30s and 40s and into the 50s until the civil rights movement showed that brown people in America may have more power. And so they began to align with the civil rights movement because it was more beneficial to them. Now, let's be very clear, because America has this history that we often overlook. So I'm gonna be very blunt. America likes to pit brown people against brown people so that it can support its own interests. And those own interests mean that many of us who are struggling to survive, whether we were formerly enslaved or we were immigrants or we got caught after the war when the new borders were drawn, lots of families were caught on one side of the border versus the other side, and families were split by those border demarcations. All of us have tried to survive in a very hostile land toward us. Some of us because of the skin color, and we were formerly enslaved Africans. Some of us because of the language we spoke, Spanish specifically, but not exclusively. Some of us because we had no status as Native American in the culture, or First Nations. We had no status as Black. We had no status as white. So we were in this limbo. So all of us had to survive this hostile land. And when I say hostile, remember, there was a time in American history when lynching people was so common that it was happening almost daily somewhere in America for decades. Yeah, so when we talk about hostility, we're not talking about just glaring looks or people. You could be lynched for not stepping off of a wooden sidewalk when a white person passed,
walk by,
or tip your hat or greet, or not greet, or whistle or not whistle. You could be lynched for blinking the wrong way, serious as stone. So when we talk about hostility and trying to navigate that hostility, survival becomes, what can I do to limit that kind of hostility that might end my life, might end my family's life? When you start talking like that, then you can see the desperation. Black people in America who were light enough would pass as white. That was out of survival. People who were coming from Mexico were emphasizing their Spanish heritage. We're white, because that was a form of survival. So you're not just looking at it from one specific angle. You have to look at it from all of these angles: colorism, language, geographic location, the status of the formerly enslaved, because there were formerly enslaved people who went to Mexico and then came back to the United States after the Civil War was over. All of this is the historical context that we're bringing from 1865 to today.
Exactly. And so I love how you highlighted when you say hostile. And so what happens is, especially when it comes to political interests and these type of things, politics always makes for, as I always say, weird. I forgot the term, but it's kind of like strange bedfellows. That's the word. Politics always makes for strange bedfellows, which means at any time, based on what's going on, you may be aligned with someone that you used to didn't be aligned with. And so when you talk about hostile, you're just talking about, in a sense, the directive or whatever's going on in the country, the United States, the government at that time could sometimes determine whether you should be aligned or not. And at any given time, even your enemy, that target could be on your enemy, and it may make sense to align. I'm not saying that we should. I'm just talking about how these things happen. So with that said, here's where I think everyone is in agreement. I'm going to share a piece from, shameless plug, unshameless plug, in my opinion, because I don't mind plugging my stuff. But Re-Education of the Negro, I have a piece that just relates to that overall hostility. And just like I always do, the piece doesn't tell people how to think, but it does give you things to think about. So I just want to share this piece with you real quick, Emil, and you just give me your opinion after hearing it, and just to share it with the audience as well. For those that don't know, I have this book designed for these type of dialogues. So this piece is Black Socrates Speaks, Immigration and the Invention of the White Race. I wrote this way back in 2013, and it's in my book I dropped last year. Actually, we're almost at the 2-year mark right now. They understand hate. Did you hear the story last week about the 11-year-old boy found dead in the desert after crossing the border, hoping to find a better life here in America? I wonder if any 11-year-old boys died on the Mayflower when pilgrims crossed the Atlantic, hoping to find a better life here in America. I know I don't have all the answers on immigration, but people act like they would do something totally different if the shoe were on the other foot. What would you risk for a better life for your family? People have always fled death, desolation, and persecution. Again, historically, why did most Americans come here? Oops, I'm Black. That's a different story. However, look up the history of the white race, and you will discover there was no white race before the transatlantic slave trade. Early in the English colonies, poor Blacks and whites were often indentured servants, and on occasion, they came together to rebel against the elite. The elite, in turn, created the white race to help quell rebellions by their indentured servants. By elevating one group over the other, poor whites and Africans stopped coming together to fight or kill the elites. And that, my friends, was the beginning of racism in this country. This situation at the border is history repeating itself all over again by creating an atmosphere of us versus them. Again, I don't know the answer, but I'm certain this is not it. I will not deny the financial burden this crisis may incur for the U.S., but for anybody who buys into illegal immigrants taking jobs and lowering wages, think again. Please note that was the same rhetoric used by the so-called white race in the 1800s when arguing against the abolition of slavery. Now ask yourself, what happened when the enslaved Blacks were freed? Basically, they kept the same damn jobs they had before they were released from enslavement. Now fast forward to today and think, when was the last time you applied for the kind of jobs immigrant day workers line up for? I bet not too many Americans can make that claim, even those living below the poverty line. Sometimes through hard work and group economics, these day workers can elevate themselves above their situation, or if not, at least make a way for their children to have better lives. How can we hate on that when that's as American as an apple pie? Just my 3 cents. All I ask is that you think. Any thoughts, brother?
Man, I love that essay. I've read it before. You've read it before too. And one of the reasons why I like it so much is that I do not hate on any people who come here and try to improve the quality of their life and their children's lives. Almost always, you're seeing those people do something affirmative in the neighborhood, in the community. They're trying to uplift themselves. And so I celebrate that. I celebrate the people who come here. I don't ever celebrate criminals, whether they're from my community or other, but I always celebrate people who are trying to uplift, who are trying to elevate. So that's part of it. And the other part is when you talked about the rebellion, I want people to, you know, I do this, but I want people to go back in time and look up Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion is what that essay is talking about. Absolutely. Bacon's Rebellion was in 1676. And why is it important? Because it was in Virginia. And all of the laws that we know today as like the Black codes and slave codes came after Bacon's Rebellion. Absolutely. And Bacon's Rebellion is when Black indentured servants and white indentured servants specifically, and also, get this, Native indentured servants came together and rose up against the ruling class. And they went to war. It was a violent, bloody rebellion. And even though it was 100 years before, it was also a precursor to the American Revolution. And it scared the landowners, the slave owners, the overseers so much that they encased in law forever slavery for Black people. They encased in law anti-miscegenation. You couldn't, because before then, there was no law against miscegenation. You could actually date and love whom you wanted. They encoded in law that Native Americans, right, they called them Indians at the time, had to be in a certain space and place. All of these hard-coded laws that traveled through the rest of the South came out of Bacon's Rebellion. So now we have the roots of all of these laws that affect how we see each other, because in Bacon's Rebellion, everybody came together. Now, there's some people who will talk about, you know, the historians will say there was some economic motivation for the white indentured servants versus the Black indentured servants. But the bottom line is they all had common cause. Yeah. And now we see the result of that. And so when we talk about what's happening in terms of race, sex, culture, class, we can point right back to Bacon's Rebellion and see it today.
And those narratives have continued to play out to the extent that we see ourselves as separate. And so at the end of the day, again, I get it. I'm not telling you how to think. At the end of the day, there could be benefit in coming together against a common, if you will, enemy in that sense. Like that's just a kind of logical thing in a sense to do. But there is a real history for why that can't come together. And I highlighted that. At the end of the day, what happened in North America happened in South America, and it was done by Europeans to include French, British, Spanish. And at the end of the day, our role in all of that has all been, in a sense, sit back, watch and see. The only difference is, to your point, I'm just kind of highlighting this one thing and we're going to go to another cut. The biggest difference for some of the intermingling what we see is the miscegenation was never really a big part of South America. That's why you have so many, and the majority of our ancestors were sent to South America. So you have this intermixed community in a way that makes this dilemma like, okay, what side are we on? But at the end of the day, we're still watching what we watched in the beginning. If you were a Native American, you just watched these white people fight over this land that ain't even there.
You know, this is, I laugh because our Native brothers and sisters, the ones who were indigenous to this land before, and I always give deference to the people who say there were Black people in America before Columbus or during the time. There were. We have evidence of that. I'm not even going to front. But the mass of the people here were indigenous to this land. Perhaps they came over a land bridge or some other way, but they were here for 5,000 years-ish, let's just say, maybe 10,000 years. those people were primarily from Asia, and they have enough genetic information to say that. I say that because we need to understand that the fight that the French versus the Spanish versus the British, because those three were the main three, especially in America, who were fighting over this land. And they were like, yo, nobody owns this land, right? And and they were trying very hard to be civilized when these savages came over here trying to take something that belonged to everyone. When they lost that war and were relegated to reservations, which is one of the tragedies of their of their presence here, we also see that their equities were lost in the shuffle. Absolutely. So Black people have fought for the American, Native American equities. They fought for the mestizo, right? The mixed European and Native folks. Right. They fought for Black. They fought for everybody, because we all know at some point having an even or level playing field benefits the entire nation.
Absolutely. Let's get into another thing that makes this a quote unquote dilemma within our community, and it's the politics of it. So I'm going to play this cut and let's just kind of peel this back as well.
Let's talk about the Democrats. They are living in another reality. Texan Democrat Jasmine Crockett has gone on MSNBC's The Katie Phang Show to insist that it's actually not a crime to enter the country illegally. Let's take a listen.
It is not a criminal violation to enter the country illegally. It's not a criminal. It's a crime. It's not a crime, which is why they're so frustrated, because they really want our local law enforcement to go out and round up people when they could be looking out for the murderers and the sexual abusers as well as the robbers. They want them to go and round people up on civil accusations.
Yeah, someone should have told her it is a crime. And last week she went on MSNBC to call Donald Trump an enemy of the state. I mean, are you surprised to hear this? I suppose no wonder she and other Democrats are so upset if they're not across the facts that entering the US illegally is against the law.
Yeah, I mean, look, if she wants to continue to.
So I wanted to play that cut, and I'm glad I know I only have you for the this last bit here, and so I'm glad I got you for this particular cut because you are the political expert here. And so I wanted to highlight that something that creates some of the dilemma within our community is we're always kind of torn between the politics we're watching, right? And what we do on the Politically Conscious show is always peel back what's actual factual versus political narrative. And so the political narrative on this issue of immigration can be confusing, I think, for some of us in our community from the standpoint of like Jasmine Crockett is kind of becoming, if you will, a star of the Democratic Party to a degree. And I think a lot of African Americans hold her in high regard. And so what we do know that happens on a lot of these political issues, the politics kind of takes us to the edges. And so since there's no nuance, a lot of times African Americans are kind of like, well, I want to side with the star of the party per se, but I'm not sure if what she's saying, how it affects. And so you'll have people in the community saying, well, let's just ride with the Democrats. And then you got other people in the community saying, well, the Democrats are stupid. You know what I mean? And so I wanted to kind of highlight the narrative that you're hearing, even in that cut, if you will. So even from her, when she's highlighting, hey, it's not a criminal thing. As a lawyer, she's right. It's more of a civil issue. I think I'm getting that correct, Emil. Right? You still there?
No, I'm here. And
okay, cool. So
you're 100%, you're 100% right.
Okay, so what happened in that clip, just to play it out, just to give the correct information. So what happened was she was highlighting that it was not a criminal thing. She didn't say, she should have said, I think, that it's a civil thing. She ended up misspeaking and just said it's not a crime. I don't think she meant that as a lawyer. And so what they do in politics is they jump in on, hey, here's a mistake. And now they're going, hey, she said it's not a crime. Like that's kind of how they play Jasmine in that actual clip. And I'm just talking about calling it for what it is. It's not me defending Jasmine. It's just what happened in that particular clip.
Right.
And then on the flip side, what again makes this immigration issue a thing is where Jasmine is highlighting, hey, they're supposed to be going after the criminals, not the good, hardworking people. That's BS. When you call this for what it is, Emil, it's BS when at the end of the day, you're trying to couch, well, we're going to handle this immigration issue and Trump says, hey, we're going after the criminals, those who are doing something. And to everybody's surprise, particularly those in the Latino community, these ICE raids are now going to, as we talked about on the show, these Home Depots. So no, you're no longer going after only the criminals. I'm highlighting that those narratives, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, are a joke in themselves. They're literally, what I'm saying is the politics is playing the people. To even
100%.
Yeah, to even silly think. Like I'm talking about even when Jasmine's saying, hey, they're not going after the criminals. And when Trump on the other side says, we're going to go after the criminals. People, that's a joke. I'm just talking about just the actual context.
That's just flapping gums, right? Like, so the Department of the Interior or Department of Homeland Security, they record two types of deportations. Most people don't know this, so they just look at deportation numbers. And so you want to look at two types of deportations. There's border deportations. They catch you at the border, they send you back over, and they say, hey, you're not allowed here. And so there's that border deportation. Then there's what's called interior deportations. That's what you're seeing ICE do right now, where people who are already here are being taken out of the country. Those are people who could have been here for 10 years, 15 years, but when you do an interior deportation, you're disrupting somebody who's probably been established for some time. So the conversation, when it doesn't talk to you about that, then you can just say it's pure politics, because those are the two types of deportations. President Obama, for instance, had a higher deportation count than almost anybody before him, but they were almost all border deportations.
Okay.
President Bush before him had a high count of interior deportations, right? So the interior and border deportations, that's used as spin, because they'll say deportations as a number, and they say, look, I'm good on illegal immigration. Look at what I'm doing. Here's my deportation numbers.
Gotcha.
And then not give you the breakdown. Right.
And again, that's what you're here for. That's why I love having you on.
And this is the kind of conversation that's missing, even from somebody as savvy as Jasmine Crockett. She's 100% right. It is not a criminal offense. It is a civil offense. Right. And the punishment for a civil offense can be a fine, imprisonment, or deportation. It's typically deportation. The detainment is part of the deportation process. And what a lot of people haven't all been able to articulate as clearly is there's also a process to determine if you are illegal in this country, because even someone who was here illegally, they get the presumption of innocence first. Right. So you still have to go through a process in order to say you're here illegally. And that's part of the other problem that you're seeing in that clip. Those two ladies from Sky News, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is, of course, the progenitor of Fox News, those two ladies who were trying to clown her weren't saying the truth either, that there's not enough information for you to decide who's illegal until you go through a process to determine if they're illegal. And then you punish them with deportation. That's the part of the process that needs to be unpacked and turned into plain speak, none of the spin.
Well, can I steal one more thought before you go from you?
Yes, sir.
And it's, again, because I know you understand the politics, I'm actually got to play another political cut. Again, not to turn this show into politics, but again, I think it's part of the unpacking of it for us as African Americans. And so what are your thoughts for the thought process, the generalized thought process for, in a sense, immigrants and African Americans saying, hey, are we really wanting to compete against this immigrant class that has nothing, all of, in a sense, especially those who have not come here correctly? Is it like, for example, the Dr. Claude Anderson saying, he always kind of highlighted historically the idea of that Democrats, when it comes to immigration, are not a benefit to the African American community because we're competing with these same people that they're trying to now eventually turn into their constituents by being easy on an immigration. And so that's kind of talked about specifically for how we as African Americans specifically should look at this issue. Like, hey, they're trying to have us compete with the very people for the same jobs that we want to have. What's your thoughts? Because again, I know that's.
I'm gonna throw an atomic weapon at you, Montoya, before I go.
All right.
Illegal immigration is a replacement for slavery.
Simple as that.
And that's the bottom line. And in America, you have a capitalist class, the owners of capital, the owners of industry, who want as cheap a labor as possible. When slavery was no longer legal, they had to find another means. Instead of going toward technology and automation, which you've heard me talk about before, they went toward hiring the cheapest labor they could find. So they imported people from China. And then they had the Chinese Exclusion Act to prevent them from being citizens. And then they were bringing more Mexicans, literally Mexicans, not just Latinos, Mexicans over the border to do their work. And then they had the great deportation from 1929 to 1939, where they're like, oh no, we're having too many Mexicans here. Yeah. Too much power is concentrated in that group.
Let me sneak this in just for sneak it in. That's when the first illegal marijuana things came, because it was like, hey, they smoked too much of this stuff. It was BS used in Utah and went to New Jersey next. So to your point, once they brought in too many, they started writing laws to criminalize the Mexicans that they willingly brought in, because we were moving up and doing well enough on our own to where we're not staying in those positions. So I just wanted to throw that in too. Go ahead, bro.
Form of slavery that they're trying to control labor. And so when I don't want us to ever have the conflict between us and illegal immigration, because quite frankly, we have radar that says anything that looks like, smells like, sounds like slavery is probably slavery. So I don't want us competing to pick strawberries or blueberries. I want to elevate the conversation to where do we fit in a nation that says we're citizens. And then the question should be, do we have the appropriate education to fit into the society and become productive members and do the things that we should be allowed to do in the society, which is not compete with people who are here illegally for formerly enslaved positions. No, we need to stop talking like that and start looking at the whole thing differently. I believe in automation for those low skill, high labor jobs, not because I'm a big believer in unemploying people, but because decades ago they should have been automated, because technology should have solved the problem when slavery went away. And now we're here.
Yeah, and let me say this, I know you got to go and let you go, but I love the point that you just made, and I want to give people just a little piece of context, because we keep hearing AI, or as you keep highlighting and pushing for automation, people kind of just have a fear, because of narratives, they have a fear-based thought with it, as if jobs are going to be replaced. I tell people there are kiosks right now. There's 2 to 3 kiosks in every McDonald's. You don't see less people in McDonald's. And so and I'm saying that specifically to our community. This is a show about us. So there is Emil, when he says he's pushing for automation, he's not pushing to replace your job. He's pushing our community to get reskilled in where the future is going. And you still need people to run the kiosks. They're just not in the store now. So I'm just kind of highlighting that and saying, so I'm with Emil 1000%. Not that we ever, like I put in that piece, we don't even go for those jobs, nor do we want to go for those jobs. But I will challenge our community to make STEM, as I've always done, and I'm just plugging this, STEM, the new NFL and new NBA, because we have H1B1s, because we don't have enough Americans to fill. So we can take the initiatives to go get those skill sets and positions and fill those high-paying jobs that we would like, because America itself can't fill it. So if we made that our new
jobs
NFL,
are available right now.
Right. So we would not, nor do we need to, as you said, compete on this illegal immigration for the reasons you just said. But the flip side of it is where we can actually have an advantage. So I'm just making that plug. Thank you, Emil, for a great time. I got one more cut that I'm going to play, but I know you got to go. So thank you for your time, brother.
I appreciate it, man. This has been a great show, great discussion. And thank you all for watching for the time I was on, and hopefully for more time with Montoya. I'll talk to you later, brother. Peace.
All right. Thank you for your time, y'all. I'm just going to hit y'all with one more cut. This is actually not immigrant related, but at the end of the day, the mental dialogue perspective, the goal is to elevate the consciousness, if you will. And so I'm going to play a cut that's not related to the immigration, but just something that I saw this week from a sister that I love, Gigi LaFleur. She's a comedian I follow on IG, and I just saw her make this video, and I thought it was worthy of a discussion on the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. But in fact, let me play one other cut real quick. No, I'm gonna leave this cut out. I was gonna play a cut by Conscious Lee for those who may follow him on IG. Real in depth on the politics of things. And so he was talking to a senator or some congressperson, highlighting how the birthright citizenship can, in a sense, circle back when it comes to this immigration issue, how it can circle back and affect us as African Americans. So while I'm kind of the position of kind of setting this out, this is my personal position. I don't see how it 100% affect us. I will highlight when I see Conscious Lee talking, there may be some issues that I have wrong, but the reality is if I play that cut and don't have a meal, I can't unpack how it could affect us. So I won't waste time playing the cut, but I do wanted to highlight that although I am one to sit out this immigration, that's my personal position. I can admit I don't necessarily understand everything from a birthright citizenship of how it actually can circle back. I don't understand that, and can say, and that's me just being open about the fact that I have taken this position, but I also understand I could be wrong about it from a political standpoint. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that thought process as well. And let me play this last cut and we'll get out of the show. Let me make sure I'm checking on the comments as well. All right, good stuff. Thank y'all for those of you that are following. There is a link y'all can jump on if y'all see the link at the very top, if y'all want to jump in and make a comment. But thank y'all for those that are watching and making comments. Let me play this last cut, and like I say, we're going in a completely different direction.
Part of being African American is people generally expect for you to be the bigger person while thinking so little of you. We're constantly told that we don't have any culture. People come on here every day and tell us that their moms and their grandparents told them not to talk to us. And then y'all come on here and say that we're all together. One thing I've learned as an African American is solidarity amongst people of color is definitely a thing. It's just sometimes the African Americans get set out to dry. We're the odd man out. And we show up for everybody. We tell everybody the lay of the land, how things go here. Nobody knows America better than us. And now it's just like, we just want the world to show up for us like we show up for them. That's all it is. We just get tired of it, man. We get tired of everybody having to be in our position before they understand our outrage. That's all. We asked you just not to say the N-word. You told us this your mouth. You say whatever you want to say. Okay.
If you're African American, I'm pretty sure you can feel what the sister Gigi LaFleur, great comedian, most of her pages just laughs, right? So clearly she had a moment. I don't know specifically what caused her to necessarily do that video, but it is a weight that I understand that we as African Americans specifically carry. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you can relate to what she said. I'm not saying everybody does. Again, we're not a monolith. But I'm highlighting it for a couple of reasons. And I think it also fits into the immigration standpoint as we keep highlighting that the rights that our ancestors fought for, that we've gotten, has been a benefit to everyone else. And in particular, if you think about the start of the show, for those who saw the very beginning, with the Cuban woman saying, hey, Black people could sit out the immigration issue because we didn't show up for them when they had their issues, whether it be George Floyd or whatever the case. And I'm just talking, again, I'm not telling you how to side on anything. I'm just talking through the nuance of this thing called race, sex, and culture. And so I wanted to highlight when, even in her frustration, she says, yeah, we just want people to show up for us, for how we show up for them. And I respect that sentiment. I will challenge and you don't have to agree with me. Again, this is just the challenge thought. I would challenge for us as African Americans not to have that expectation. I think it's been clearly a reality throughout our time here in the country, and so to not have that expectation, in my opinion, mentally prepares you to deal with that the natural weight of what comes with the systemic oppression that many people still don't want to acknowledge, that is still part of the system. And I'm challenging to expect what it always is. And there's a process, and even in doing that, even being able to do what I'm suggesting takes mental capacity. I am highlighting that if you are able to not have this expectation of any other group showing up for us, if you're able to really accept it in your mind, I think it mentally strengthens you to not feel the weight of, as she's in that video, exasperated, saying we just want people to show up for us like they show up for them. And if that's never going to be the opportunity, if that's never going to happen, then I'm not saying that we can't accept help for true allies. I'm not saying that we cannot. So let me just try to walk through this in a nuanced fashion. I'm down for any ally that shows themselves to be true. So let me say that on a side note, just to be clear of what I'm saying. However, I do think it strengthens our mental capacity to not have the expectation. Because if you think about anything in your life, expectations quite often bring you strife in any personal thing. It could be something as simple as when you're a child hoping to get the toy that you asked for at Christmas and you get another toy. You didn't get the toy that you asked for, but your parents got you something. In all reality, you should be thankful that they got you anything, right? But it's hard to feel that in the moment, that expectation of getting the toy you wanted, you're frustrated. You have to pretend that you like what they gave you I'm just using a silly example to just say how expectations can bring on more strife. And so I'm just saying, I love that sister. Again, I follow her. She's funny as hell. And I'm just saying, when you understand that reality, and we always hear the comment, no one's coming to help us, right? We always hear that comment. I don't ride with that comment 1,000%. And the reason I don't ride with that comment 1,000% because when I look at even the history in this country, even the things that our ancestors got us, they were quite often done in strategic alliance with other groups, even white people to a degree, to, in a sense, advance for us to have the ability. Because I don't think we, in my opinion, and I stand on this, we don't pay proper respect to what our ancestors actually got us and what their efforts were about. We have misunderstood the history, romanticized the history to an extent to actually believe. I saw a good friend of mine who follows this show say a comment that I detest. That prior to integration, how well our community was doing. That's a romanticized history. We had amazing Black enclaves that is dope to dig up the history and find out about, the Black Wall Streets, the Rosewoods, the Winston-Salems, how Harlem was at a particular point before it went through what it went through. So it's beautiful to go, in a sense, find that hidden history to find out, because if you go through 12 years of public school education, all you're going to get told as a Black child is that you were slaves. We know that ain't the truth either. So it's beautiful to go find out. I'm going somewhere here, so I will just walk with me as I walk through this. So it's beautiful to go find out the history of those enclaves. Like if you know anything specifically about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and what happened with the massacre at Wall Street, they basically continued for years to intentionally, the Oklahoma government itself intentionally hid that history to where even Oklahomans didn't know that Tulsa even existed. And then I had a brother that when I first started in radio, Mr. Jim Klingman used to come on my show all the time. He interviewed the last 8 survivors of the Tulsa race riots, and they shared with him how it became a no-no to talk about because those who actually experienced the actual riots, they didn't talk about it in fear of it could happen again. So you had the actual people who went through it not talking about it. You had a government apparatus intentionally hiding the history. And so for years, it's a thing that we're proud of now, right? We talk about, Black Wall Street and that type of thing. But growing up, I loved Black history. I didn't know anything about Black Wall Street. We now know why, because of the concerted effort to hide that history. Again, I'm going somewhere where y'all just keep walking through this thing, and I'm gonna get off this show on y'all. And so I'm highlighting, while we go on and research and continue to finding more enclaves. There were many enclaves, but here's the reality. When I say many enclaves, it's not just Rosewood, it's not just Winston-Salem, it's not just Tulsa, Oklahoma, that were Black enclaves, successful Black enclaves. We can go now, and you can go do more research and find the many. The many still equated to, and this is what, when I say we romanticize the history, the many equated to about, those enclaves were about 2% of African Americans who were living and thriving in those enclaves. Another thing that gets lost on how they were able to build those enclaves, a lot of them started in the period after the Civil War ended and the Reconstruction period, where, especially the ones that were in the South specifically, a lot of that started because there were places after the Civil War where there were more African Americans than white people. Plenty of areas around the South in which that's the case. I think there was even 1 or 2 states where there were more African Americans due to the number of enslaved Africans in those states. Well, I think they even outnumbered the white population throughout this state. Don't quote me on that. That's some research I did years ago, but just from my recollection. But it definitely were plenty of regions. And so after the Civil War, and the military is still in the South, in a sense, punishing their former rebellious part of the country, right? So they kept the military in the South, partly to rebuild the South, because that's where most of the wars took place, but partly to control their former rebellious, now still Union members, because the North won the war. So with that said, those large African-American communities quickly got into politics, elected their own officials, and a lot of those enclaves were built up because people were controlling their own areas. The reason I'm highlighting that specifics is because we have this notion that a lot of those enclaves happen on their own without any parts of the system. And I'm like, no, when they had complete access to the political governmental system, they were able to control their own areas within the system. And because a lot of times we lose that context on how those Black enclaves were often built up within using the same exact system that the rest of the Americas were using, they previously, as enslaved Africans, had no access to that, right? And I'm just highlighting that when you lose the context of how those enclaves get built up, we have this notion that somehow you can do it without the system. And what's something that we're always doing on the politically conscious is trying to connect the dots to what role politics actually plays in our lives. I don't want to overstate it, but sometimes we try to separate it and not understand that even the enclaves that we now can go dig up and find out about, they actually were using the same system that now some people say, why even vote? Not realizing that they put 6 people in Congress after that 12-year period. And then after the North-South compromise, where they finally said, all right, we'll pull the military out of the South, the Ku Klux Klan bores its ugly head, becomes a thing. You know what they cared about the most? For all of their running around, lynching and terrorizing, you know what they cared about the most? They saw what happened during that 12 years of Reconstruction, and they wanted to destroy the Black vote. That was the thing that they wanted to understand. So I'm on my soapbox talking about understanding what our ancestors who understood the power of politics. And so we actually misunderstand 50 years later after that period where Reconstruction ends and then the civil rights movement start. We mistakenly think that integration was about being next to the white man. And I heard her, and this is just the point, and I'm going to close out. And I heard a brother who I highly respect stating something I used to believe before I dug into the history and the context, that our ancestors partly pushed for integration because we thought the white man's ice was colder. It's a complete bastardization of what the purpose of the civil rights movement was. is not why they fought for civil rights. They fought for civil rights because all these black enclaves that we're now able to find out about that were destroyed, more than Tulsa, Oklahoma, there were plenty that were destroyed various ways, whether highways were built through them. We even hear about, in a sense, the water being pushed over the land. The one here in Georgia, Lake Lanier, that history is incorrect. I just want to throw that out there. If you go dig up the history, they didn't put water over a majority black town with Lake Lanier. I could dig into that, but I'm not going to do that because I got to get out of here myself. But I just like to give people correct information. That's just one particular one. There are other towns in which water was pushed over where there were relatively thriving black enclaves. I'm highlighting that to put all the history together. So we now go get to dig up those histories and find out, dang, they were destroying places where we were thriving, and they were allowed to do it once the military was pulled out. So the civil rights era and movement was, and I will tell this one story. This is what opened my eyes to realizing our ancestors didn't think the white man's ice was colder. I believed that type of rhetoric until I dug into this particular history. So I discovered this one time. I forgot how I came across it, but there was this white farmer in Texas who was doing pretty well for himself during the segregation period. The civil rights movement was kind of already starting, and Time magazine actually wanted to interview him because he was doing, in a sense, well for himself before because at the time there was this idea of staying segregated and just kind of being apart. You even had the Nation of Islam saying, hey, give us a few states, and just kind of separating the races, if you will. And so there was all this sentiment out there. And so there was this civil rights pushing. This was in the 50s when this interview happened or whatever. And so they go interview this farmer, one, because he was doing well for himself in Texas as a black farmer, again, prior to civil rights. And they asked him a question during the interview, whether he was for integration or not, because that's partly why they highlighted him. He was doing well, and his position was he was for integration. Now, this is a black farmer doing well for himself. So what I want to put in context, again, me used to believing that our people wanted to be next to the white man. So why, I want to give y'all some context. Why would our ancestors, especially those that actually were able to be in one of those, in that 2%, in the ones that were actually having these great cities on their own, why would they ever want integration? And we foolishly say today to be next to the white man because we thought the white man's ice was colder. Hell no. If they're, especially those that were doing well, if you're doing well on your own without the quote unquote help of the white man, there's no way that our ancestors eventually said, well, I'd rather have the white man stuff. And some of our masters teachers say these things, but when you actually find out the history, you find out that's not the case. We're saying that now to push people to follow you in current times, to sound like you know what you're talking about. Here's the reality. Back to that example. So they asked the guy, are you for integration? He said yes. And his yes was for this reason. He says, although I'm doing well and successful in my business, I often have, matter of fact, this particular farmer, he had invented some particular tool. That's kind of how he was able to become successful. This particular tool helped with farming or whatever, and he was able to, in a sense, make more money, not only having a successful farm, but he was able to sell or patent. Maybe I don't want to exaggerate it. I don't know if he patented a tool, whatever, but either way, that innovation helped him do okay for himself, as in addition to just being a successful farmer. So I'm just giving as much as context as I recall from it. But anyway, so when they're asking him why, he's already doing well for himself. And he was saying, hey, different shipments that I need to come to my farm or whatever, they're often sabotaged, because as the white farmers around him saw his success, they became envious. And so when his shipments were sabotaged, he had no recompense. At that time, a white man can't go, a black man can't go say, hey, this white man did this to me and get any equal protection in the legal. Like, you couldn't even, there were periods in the South where, a white man could murder someone with no recompense. And so what he was highlighting in his business, as the white envious farmers were getting aware of his success, they were doing things to mess with his business. So his reason for integration, because it had been explained this way, we don't learn it this way in school now. But the only reason MLK and the SCLC were pushing for civil rights in the manner they were, it was to be left alone and have legal recompense. And they figured as a strategy that if you get out of this second-class citizenship area, it wasn't said that way, but we were in basically second-class citizens under the Jim Crow stuff, right? It wasn't put that way legally per se, but it was, if you actually get integrated into society, you would have a better opportunity for equal protection of the law. And so that particular farmer was saying, yeah, I just want to, if somebody takes my stuff, I want to be able to say, hey, they took my stuff, and get recompense, which allows him to effectively stay in business. Martin Luther King, you can find him on the internet highlighting spend in black banks, spend in black businesses. So we have bastardized what the goal was. The goal was to be so integrated in society that when we build our thing of our own, you can't go and destroy it like you did Tulsa, Oklahoma. You can't come destroy it. Or actually, the only coup we've ever had in this country was in reference to Winston-Salem. Go look that up. So I'm just highlighting, by us misunderstanding what the efforts was we actually think our ancestors thought the white man's ice was cold. Hell no. They just wanted to be left the hell alone and use the system and control the economics and the politics of their area. And when they were allowed to do that, that's how you got some black enclaves. That can happen today, and believe it or not, don't allow the history to think that a black enclave built today will have someone coming to burn it down tomorrow. That's why our ancestors, they already got us past that point. That's what I say, we don't honor what they actually did enough. We actually still have a historical context and fear and misnomer what they actually did and say they were trying to get to the next to the white man. They was not. And then we say, well, if we build it up again, they'll come do it again. That's not true. And they weren't trying to get next to the white man. We have a situation now where if you control the economics and the politics of your area, things are beautiful. I came to Atlanta for that very reason. I came from a 20% black town, small black town in South Carolina. I live in Atlanta. And when people say, what has politics gotten you? It's gotten me better schools. It's gotten transportation to where people can go get better jobs, because these are things that I actually voted on locally. So just bringing that context in here to close out this show. Hope y'all have enjoyed. I got a couple of comments. Let me see these comments before I go, to make sure I didn't skip over anything. Okay, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'll definitely break down the Lake Lanier facts or whatever. Yeah, that story of them. Yeah, it literally. What is it? I'll break it down, Iris. Yeah, that's not a fact. That's not a fact. It wasn't a majority black town. There was at the time that the water wasn't put over it for the reasons that you would thought or whatever. They had a period where they went lynching the black side of town because of a false rape charge or whatever. But that was 20, 30 years before the actual lake was pushed over. So I'll break down the story on that one day as well. All right, y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed today's show. If you did, make sure you are subscribing to the page. Share this show to others. Get it out. The Mental Dialogue Perspective. Our goal is to give you context and perspective. All I ask is that you think. See y'all in a couple of weeks. We're popping up every couple of weeks, couple times a month. And go follow us on the YouTube page to see our Politically Conscious show. We do those once a week as well. Those are pop-up shows. So if you like what we're doing, if you really love what we're doing, support it so that we can stay on the radio, which is going to mentaldialogue.com and becoming an actual supporter of what we do. Don't come to see what you can get. Come to see what you can give. We have this vibrant, very, very, very vibrant nationwide virtual neighborhood where we do business with each other. I literally connected 2 people this week. 4 people this week, and one they're actually setting up to do a visit in, I think, not Togo. I hope I'm saying it right, not Cameroon, but Togo, because one of our former members has the first black-owned textile company in the country since 1908. And so she does farming with black farmers here in America as well as over in Africa. And so one of our longtime listeners is getting her connected with one of the countries that has this huge warehouse full of cotton. And so because of her business, she wants to make that connection. So that's the big things we're doing, just simply by having the dialogues and finding, as I call all of you, intellectual outcasts that want to think beyond the narratives. So I appreciate y'all, but that's what you're supporting when you go support us at mentaldialogue.com. If you have a business, then also consider joining at the platinum and black levels, and we'll get you integrated and let you promote your business within our neighborhood, because that's what I call it. It's the Mental Dialogue Community Club, but we're really neighbors. And as I always say, we can be neighbors without living next to each other. So this is much bigger than a podcast. It's much bigger than our once a month meetup. Speaking of, I meant to play my commercial for next Friday. One last plug and I'm out of here. If you're in Atlanta next week, some of y'all may have seen the book club share that we've done as a separate event. We're bringing that together with the Mental Dialogue live experience. So if you are a book lover, go to mentaldialogue.com and look up Espresso and Expressions. If you're a book lover, you're going to love next Friday's live experience at Urban Grind, black-owned coffee shop here in Atlanta. See y'all, hopefully, if you're in Atlanta next Friday or next week on the pop-up show. All I ask is that you think.